I don't even see you in here, Fitz. Where are you?
I am in here. Oh, wait, I'm here. I'm here. I was muted, but I'm not muted anymore. Can you hear me now, Mike?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, wow. Don't you laugh at me like I'm an idiot, because this is
You are an
what
idiot.
Okay, that's fair. We've started this exactly the way I expected this Spaces would start. We're going to give everybody a second to get in and hang out with us. But Mike, I'm just excited because I feel like this is an annual tradition. Every year on Halloween, I get to sit. What's better than full-size candy bars, full-size Golic hanging out with full-size Fitz, and we give you rankings reaction. Come on, man. Like, it just feels like
you're
we're
not
reunited.
Full-size, you're fun size. What are you talking about?
Yeah, baby. Orange Theory-ing it up. Let's go.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant that you're short.
No, I'm not. I'm sufficiently average. All right, let's start the important thing.
I'm not fat. I'm festively plump.
Oh, okay. Well, this is happening already. Okay, people are getting ready for this. I'm going to tell everybody what we're going to do. We're going to react like we always do to everything that we just saw, Mike. And while people are getting in here, let's just give the quick rundown. Obviously, the committee, the College Football Playoff Committee, has spoken for the first time through this process. And in speaking, they've given us sort of a sense of what they value. So, we'll start with the basics. The top 6 teams in all the land have been revealed, and those top 6 teams in order 6-1. Oregon comes in at the highest ranked of the one-loss teams at number 6, Washington at number 5, Florida State at 4, Michigan at 3, Georgia at 2, and Ohio State at number 1 in all the land. I know we'll get to a bunch of deep dive reaction here in a second, but any initial quick reactions there, Mike?
No, I said this morning talking on Gojo and Golic that you can check out wherever you get your podcasts. I said you could sell me on pretty much any order of the top 4 teams in the country that we had in the AP poll. In the AP poll, it was Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and then Florida State. And I said pretty much everything but Florida State at 1, you could probably sell me on. And so I'm not surprised Ohio State got up there. We know for them, strength of resume, the stat that we're going to talk about a lot over the course of their night, the chance that the average top 25 team would be able to achieve your record or better given the same schedule. Ohio State ranked number 1. And when you look at the end of any given college football playoff season, when we've got the Final Four, those are almost always teams within the top 6 of that particular metric. And so I don't know if it would technically make it predictive then as much as it is indicative of usually in line with that thinking, but they've got the win against Penn State. They've got the out-of-conference win on the road at Notre Dame, and early in this season, you're hard-pressed to find 2 wins better than that. Notre Dame checking in at 15 in this initial poll, and Penn State checking in at 11, so 2 top 15 wins, one of them on the road for Ohio State. Totally understand them at 1. Totally understand Georgia at 2. I know you and I kind of disagree on that. You were disappointed when you saw the Bulldogs colors roll in at number 2 ahead of Michigan and Florida State, but I get it. I saw them play Kentucky in person. I saw what the Death Star still looks like when it's charged up all the way. That's a team that still looks like one of the best in college football to me. And we know doing it about Brock Bowers right now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, okay. Here's the thing, Mike. I want to love everything about this. Again, Oregon 6, Washington 5, Florida State 4, Michigan 3, Georgia 2, Ohio State 1. I want to love it, but I don't love any of it. Now, we could take the simple concept that you and I always take in this situation of it will work itself out, but I ask you, what the hell is the point of playing anybody at this point? Because Georgia sits at number 2 with a 111th strength of schedule. Michigan sits at number 3, or 100th, and Michigan sits at number 3 with 111th. Like, I'm wondering why we bother playing anybody at this point. And then on top of all of that, Georgia hasn't been dominant in every single game. So I'm looking over here at Florida State, who's at least put it on the line, Mike, and I'm saying, what is the point? At least Washington has put it on the line. Washington, according to this very schedule, Washington has the best win in the country, and for that, they don't even get a top 4. There's no logic to this.
But Fitz, your idea of play somebody and then bringing up Washington is flawed because Washington played Michigan State out of conference, who's burning down in front of us at this very moment. Were it not for Connor the Stallion, we'd be talking a lot more about the state of Michigan State's program and not the state of Michigan's program, which is interesting to factor in about this. We haven't heard what the committee said, but Washington didn't play anybody out of conference. They just got lucky that their game against Oregon was earlier on here than the tough games that are going to be on Georgia's schedule. Missouri coming up right now, who is ranked 12th in the initial college football playoff poll, what we've eventually got in the SEC championship game for Georgia. And this idea fits that you don't need to play anybody really only works if you're one of the teams that rolls in like these two teams, where if you're Georgia, you're back-to-back defending champions. So wrong,
but that can't matter.
You're going to get. But Jason, I'm just telling you, human committee, these things are baked in. Michigan returns all of the same offensive talent, especially from a team that made the playoff last year. And so we look and say, all right, while you haven't played anybody yet, you've been dominant in the ways that we've all expected. So I'm not surprised that they're getting that kind of love.
It cannot matter, again, by rule. And this is where I'm going to push up my glasses and be the nerd in the back that's like, hey, guys, guess what? There are rules. And this is where, raise the glass. You can take a shot every time we talk about the fact that I've taken the mock committee process. But in the mock committee process, we learned the committee is specifically told past performance cannot be factored in. So 2 prior national championships cannot even enter the conversation. It's gross because maybe you're right that humans still have to allow it to happen, Mike, but
so you're telling me, Jason, you watched Georgia this year and you're just like, man, new team, no idea what they've ever done. Stunned to see them doing so well. Plucky Georgia managing to get through all this. Know nothing about them. Like, that's not, like, again, I understand that idea for the committee that, yes, you're obviously not walking into that room and using that as the basis for an argument, but we're all human beings. We can't help that sometimes, I think. And so I think that's possible. Why, to me, Fitz, I think your hostility is misguided there, because they rewarded resume. They said Ohio State, what you did, worthy. For Florida State, you just got unlucky that Clemson decided to go and start to lose 4 games, that Duke has tailed off now, in part because the quarterback, Riley Leonard, that got hurt playing against Notre Dame, got re-injured against Florida State in a game that, oh, by the way, Duke was in control of before Riley Leonard went down. I was at that game too, and they were knocking on the doorstep going into the end zone before Riley Leonard gets hurt. Their backup quarterback goes in, and everything changes for them. And so for Florida State, really all you have to point to is that week 1 win against LSU as far as your strength of schedule. So while the numbers back it up, I think the committee's initial rankings of the rest of these teams kind of show you what they thought of Florida State, who, remember, was a missed field goal by Clemson away from losing that game, was on the ropes against a bad Boston College team. So all these things, I think, add into where they currently sit, which is, by the way, still inside the top 4.
All right, if you're just tuning into the Spaces, you're getting what you've had for years. He's Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz, and we decided 2 buddies needed to sit down and react to everything that we've seen like we did for years. We're going to get to a bunch of the takes here. Mike, you can obviously listen to on Gojo and Golic, wherever you get your podcast. You can check me out, obviously, across everything happening at Yahoo Sports. Important quick question before we get to the rest of it, Mike. I didn't have any Cheez-It, and for years we ate Cheez-It on the set of our shows together. I got a Halloween cupcake from the gas station. It has like the Halloween colors on the top though. So does that are we good on the snack game?
Yeah, I mean, we're both kind of like orange tangent. I have the pumpkin candy corns here. So spiritually we're aligned, and although the colors don't taste any different, it certainly feels like it.
No, it's a better candy corn because it has more, there's more, it's thicker. There's more.
It's got some ass to it.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't going to say it that way, but
bite it in half.
Okay. Well, little guys like me still, we can bite the little candy corns in half. Okay. One of the curious things to me about the College Football Playoff Committee in the initial rankings. And look, the initial rankings always give you an idea of the personality of the committee. So I love to be able to say, can we take a general rule? So earlier, we just talked about the fact that Washington has the best win so far this year over Oregon. So Washington sits at 5, Oregon sits at 6. That makes sense. Oregon has 1 loss. What doesn't make sense to me is the number 7 team in all the land is Texas. Number 9 is Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure I was sitting there with my buddy, humble brag, Chris Young, the big Texas fan, as he was doing push-ups to try and get out the anger and aggression after he watched Texas lose to Oklahoma. I don't know what I missed there, because last time I checked, Texas lost to Oklahoma, and in the initial college football playoff rankings, they're ahead of them. Now I'm going to say, why do we even play the games?
This is eerily reminiscent of, I think it was 2 years ago, when Michigan State beat Michigan, and then in the subsequent CFP ranking, they automatically just flip the 2 because they're like, yeah, having Kenneth Walker III doesn't make you a better football team in all the ways that we know. I agree with you, though, Fitz. And to me, this was like a layup. You want to talk about the committee and learning about their personality. The one thing we know, having both gone through this process, is people aren't just doing it to do it in there. They stand on what they believe. You've got former coaches in there. You've got athletic directors. You've got former players who are, I'm sure, going to stand up for the teams they believe are truly better. And that's always the fine line in this best versus most deserving, this thing we say every year. But to me, this was an easy opportunity to say this point in the season, only 3 games removed from that Oklahoma win over Texas at Red River, that's got to matter. You've got Alabama ranked below Texas for that said same reason, because Texas went on the road early this season and beat Alabama. They did it. Alabama's got the best loss, you could argue, so far this season based on this poll. And so I'm a little bit stunned that they didn't just do the easy thing, which would have been to go Oklahoma at 7, Texas at 8, and then Alabama at 9, 1, 2, 3, knowing full well, again, all of this is going to get worked out. All these teams, if Texas and Oklahoma do what they're supposed to do, got a really good chance of meeting again in the Big 12 championship and settling things that way.
So is there some element here where this is about Texas? I don't know. Like, I can't find a way. Like, I just wanted to find a way to justify Texas being higher. I can't find it. If I'm Oklahoma right now,
for you, Texas looked better than Oklahoma for large stretches of that game. And were it not for, I mean, Quinn Ewers basically threw an interception on like the first or second play of that game. They fumbled down in the red zone. There were plenty of stretches where you could have watched that game and said Texas looked like the better team sans turnovers. And if they played again, a lot like we're going to talk about Oregon and Washington, if you rematched both of those games, both of those early season contests that were big deciders of the sport, I have a feeling Texas would be favored, provided you have a healthy Quinn Ewers, which we know you didn't this past weekend when they still took care of business against BYU. And if you had Oregon and Washington on a neutral field, I think Oregon's going to be favored based on what we've seen the last couple of weeks with Washington's offense largely stalling out. And again, going back to that game, Oregon controlling the large portion of that game and Washington having to rally late with some big plays by that offense in order to get the win.
Yeah, okay, so I buy everything you're saying right there, and I also buy that the committee sometimes, in general, is safe in these situations, right? Like, we know that the committee will turn around and say, hey, this will work itself out, and I don't disagree with you. Like, right now, if I had to bet your house, as I always say, because I'm not betting mine, on, Oregon, Washington, neutral field, I would probably bet it on Oregon. I really would. But I still have to turn around at some point and say, but we just saw the result. It's not even like we saw the result week 1 and maybe things have changed. Like, we're not even in that. We're in the we just saw that result. So I think when you start looking at Texas, Oklahoma, like, I just have to reward the fact that we literally just saw this a few weeks ago. And when you look at most of the rankings across the board, that again, I'm going to be the analytics nerd for a second, or the numbers nerd for a second. Game control is not drastically different for one team than it is for the other. Strength of resume is not drastically different for one team than the other. I'm having a hard time finding a metric reason. So if we're just going to blanketly say, well, it's just because the eye test, they look better. Like, that frustrates me, man. Because like, if the eye test is the only answer, then that's Pandora's box, Mike.
It is confusing just because when you look elsewhere in this so far, head-to-head has tended to matter, right? Louisville obviously has one fewer loss than Notre Dame in the L-Column, but their loss is pretty bad to a Pitt team that looks like it's falling apart this year for Pat Narduzzi. And it was a double-digit loss. It's usually the kind of loss that's a disqualifier, but Louisville ranked 2 spots ahead of Notre Dame at 13 with that head-to-head win and only 1 loss on the schedule. And again, Washington over Oregon for that same reason, Texas over Alabama for that same reason. So it's really the one spot that I can at least find going through right now where there's that inconsistency. And I'll be curious to hear, Boo Corrigan is the chairperson for the College Football Playoff Committee this year. I'll be interested to hear what his answer was to that question when he's asked.
So Sooner St. Nick hopped in on the questions here and said, I thought OU had the best win versus the number 3 Texas on a neutral field. OU won in a matter that no one doubts they were the better team. Washington won at home versus number 8 Oregon. Everyone knows Oregon lost the game as much as Washington won. So how's Washington got the best win? We can't, the committee is going to judge this based on where these teams are right now. So when I say they have the best team, it's because the committee, or the best win, the committee just ranked Oregon. Actually, yeah, no, I'll stand by this. Yeah, Oregon at this point ranked number 6. That's the best win. Like, there's no two ways about it. Oklahoma has a win over Texas, but Texas is ranked below Oregon. So yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it's based on where they're ranked today, not where they were ranked when they played. And that's an important thing to remember, even when we look at, LSU. Like, when we look early in the season, as we learn more about these teams, they're going to judge these teams based on where they are today. Like, it's significant today where the fact that Duke isn't ranked today is significant for everybody. It's not about where Duke was ranked when they played them.
No, and that's an important distinction. You're absolutely right. And I think it's part of the reason why, as we look at this, Utah sitting down at 18 and was even higher than that before, the last thing we saw from Oregon, because one of the big questions coming in every year is who was going to be the highest ranked one-loss team. We were wondering between that group of Oregon, Texas, Alabama, and Oklahoma, who would be mixed up in that bag. And Oregon being up there, to me, is in due large part to the fact that they went on the road to Utah, a place that had, a 19-game home winning streak, and beat the brakes off of them a week after we saw Utah do what they did to a struggling USC team. So there's a lot of respect garnered from that win when we talk about resume points already for the Pac-12 that is in the middle of the stretch, right? The Pac-12 going to have plenty of opportunities to stub its toe because you've got this stretch from now until the end of November where all these teams are going to play in a round robin. Oregon State, who's down at 16, is going to have a chance to upend Oregon season pretty soon. So all this stuff still on the horizon.
Speaking of still on the horizon, I think we've set a new record. All right. And I'm pretty proud of us. We've gotten this far into the conversation about the rankings, and we haven't actually mentioned Roll Damn Tide. And Roll Damn Tide is sitting Alabama, sitting at number 8. Play me some mountain music. They are sitting at number 8 at 7-1. And Mike, like when we're watching like everybody else is. We're watching the rankings come out on ESPN. You and I both an eyebrow raised, and it was like, oh man, there isn't just a path here to the college football playoff. There's a yellow brick damn road to the college football playoff.
So one of the other ways that you can always frame this is who controls their own destiny at this point.
That's
like you look,
professional.
Alabama 2 spots ahead of Ole Miss, who they've got a head-to-head win against. Ole Miss, a one-loss team competing with Alabama in the SEC West. So Ole Miss doesn't control their own destiny. They would need Alabama to stub their toe. You've got LSU coming up this weekend. Obviously, Auburn to end the year. We've seen they can be a tough out if you're not careful as a team first year under Hugh Freeze. But if you look at that, Alabama absolutely controls their own destiny right now. They've got a potential for another ranked win this weekend against LSU, and then you've got the potential for the SEC championship to knock off of everything hold serve, at worst, the second best team in the country. And so, yeah, at that point, while it's complicated this year because, well, we know, right? Ohio State and Michigan, one of those teams is going to end up with one loss after they play that game. And the important distinction you and I were talking about before this is, as we start to measure, how could this shake out for certain teams, especially if you're a one-loss team trying to crack the code in a year where we've got 5 undefeateds right now, but we're only going to at best end up with 4 based on the fact that Ohio State and Michigan have to play in the regular season. That's an important note because if Alabama or Georgia notches a loss, it's going to come against Alabama in the SEC championship if we play that out. And so that's a marked difference between Georgia, one loss, non-conference champion, but losing in that one, and then the loser of Ohio State and Michigan, who would be one loss, no conference championship game even appearance, sitting at home while all this 13th data point stuff happens.
I just can't. I can't. Like every week this year, I've been like, I'm telling you, Alabama's just not that good. Like it's just not. They're not great. Like blah blah. Every week, I feel like I'm going out here and I'm rolling them, and it's the Undertaker gif. Like that's what happened. Like the Undertaker is rising up every single time I think the Undertaker's down. They're rising up, and Alabama they're sitting in prime real estate. Like obviously they've got some big games ahead of them. They'll have to win. But the fact that it has been an off year for Alabama, and yet they absolutely still control their own destiny and get into the college football playoff. Like, we ain't saying that about Clemson. Off year for Clemson. We ain't saying that about them, right? But like Alabama is right there, and it's gross.
I mean, it's Nick Saban doing what he's done. Like, that's been the biggest difference. Like Dabo, obviously, we're not going to get into Tyler from Spartanburg territory here in slandering Dabo, who's accomplished a lot at a place that it's hard to do that at in Clemson. But the one thing Dabo's never really had to do is adjust his formula, right? Dabo's formula since he got there has been, we're going to have the Monstars playing in the front 7 on defense. We're going to have future first rounders at wide receiver and a generational talent at quarterback. And you can take that all the way back to Taj Boyd, who was a phenomenal college football player. And then on through what we saw with, Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and even Kelly Bryant in the middle got them to the playoffs. So you've had a formula that worked, and now that formula has slipped and you don't have first rounders at wide receiver, and Cade Klubnik just looks like a normal kind of good college quarterback, not even a great one, you struggle. For Alabama, they've won a million different ways, and this year you got a quarterback who's just kind of good, got benched for a couple of games so they could work out a couple other guys, and Nick just finds a way to win again. He is the most resilient coach in college football, probably the most resilient coach in college football history.
Look, it's there in front of him, and that's let's just be honest for a second. You and I love this. I think we did our first rankings reaction show on Halloween in 2017. I think it was together. And I had an inflatable cowboy costume on that I had to keep. And that's a career moment for me. But even back then, you and I sitting in your house before we went to Starbucks before the show, we said, the craziest thing about this is everybody gets worked up and it works itself out. Like, we know that it works itself out. Alabama's a perfect, if they belong in, they're going to win their way in. And that's oversimplification, I know, but I still believe it. People are fired up still about Oklahoma. Zach came in and said, what hurts Oklahoma is Kentucky still viewed as a bad loss. The experts, in quotes, haven't adjusted their perception of how good Kansas is. They still think it's 2010 to 2021 Kansas. I disagree with that assessment at its very core, because the committee gave Kansas today a high ranking. They were number 21, right? So Kansas comes in at number 21, which, remembering that the committee is told to factor in the wins, the losses, who's healthy, who's not healthy. Kansas' season looks much different if they have their starting quarterback. They don't, right? And the fact that the committee didn't ding them for that, I think the committee is telling you that they respect Kansas. I just think the committee is also telling you that they don't think today on a neutral field that Kansas beats LSU. I don't think that's a hot take. I think Kansas is kind of appropriately rated in this.
I think they are as well. And I mean, one of the other things the committee factors in is common opponent, right? And Texas blew the doors off Kansas that was led by the same quarterback. It was Jason Bean that started both games for them. It's hard to even call him a backup. He's played so much in the last 2 years. And so I don't know what to tell you. That's one of the other things. I disagree with them. I think that Oklahoma should be ranked above Texas at this point. I understand the recency of that loss, and the fact that Texas waxed that common opponent certainly factors in. And if you wanted to sell me on that Fitz in the 3rd or 4th ranking in the middle of November, I'd absolutely buy that, because we're far enough. We'll have a few more games under there. We'll see as these teams develop, because you design and try and figure out as a football team every year, how can we play our best football in November? That's always the goal. And so if you told me that, hey, Texas and Oklahoma played and were one way back in October when they met, and now they're going to be a different way when we see them in November, I'd buy that. But right now it feels premature.
If you're just tuning into the Twitter Spaces trying to figure out what in the hell is going on, he's Mike Golic Jr., I'm Jason Fitz, and we're reacting to college football initial playoff rankings at number 6, Oregon, number 5, Washington, number 4, Florida State, number 3, Michigan, number 2, Georgia, number 1, Ohio State. A lot of other important rankings in there for the rest of the season. But before we get to anything else that stands out, we have not talked about one important part of this, and I think everybody was going to try and figure out. What do you do with the allegations that Michigan's a bunch of damn cheaters? So, if you are the committee, I love the professional analysis, by the way, but, what do you do if you are sitting here on the committee and you're trying to figure out what to do with Michigan at this point, who has somewhat of a cloud over their head, but also you're just factoring what you've seen on the field. Michigan's absolutely dominated.
So Boo Corrigan, the chairperson of the College Football Playoff Committee, got asked about this when he joined the ESPN rankings broadcast, and he said, we view that as an NCAA issue, not a CFP issue. So that's right there. My dad always calls that the Pontius Pilate, washing their hands of that one, making that somebody else's problem right now. And I get that, Fitz, because there's nothing they're going to know about this. The CFP is not actively investigating this. They're not aware of any information outside of what's being reported. They're obviously all in the know. Ward Manuel, Michigan's athletic director, is on the College Football Playoff Committee this year. And so if anyone's unaware, if you've got an affiliation with the school being discussed, you have to recuse yourself. He's literally out of the room when that group debates Michigan in this order. And so that's all factored into this somewhat, but at the end of the day, there's not a probe from the CFP that's its own separate governing body from the NCAA. And so I'm not surprised that they're washing their hands of this, Fitz. That makes sense.
I don't think they can do anything about it. If Georgia wants to know why they're sitting at number 3, I think the reason that they're sitting at number 3 is pretty simple. They haven't played anybody. And that's not necessarily their fault. Like I said on one of my college football recap videos for Yahoo last week, I said, man, calling Michigan State a cupcake at this point is an insult to good cupcakes everywhere. Like, Michigan State is trash. Right now, we talk about, like, on a neutral field. On a neutral field, I think Vandy would kick the snot out of Michigan State, right? Like, looking across the board, Michigan State just isn't good. So that's not Michigan's fault that one of their biggest rivals just happens to be a big old barrel of suck this year. But that also, like, if you're the committee, how do you do anything with that? Like, Mike's, see, this is what happens.
Big old barrel of suck.
Yeah, it's a big
Dear
old, like,
God.
there's just a big old barrel sitting in the corner of the room. You take off the lid of the barrel, and it's just wafts suck everywhere. That's what Michigan
You
State
seem
is.
like the guy that would own a suck barrel.
Oh, you seem like the guy that would see it and then be like, I need me one of them. I'm just saying, Mike.
No, you're absolutely right. Fitz, what I want to ask you though, because I think as we kind of comb through all the things that we talk about when the first round of rankings come out, is also who's the lowest ranked team that actually still has a path to the postseason. We go all the way back to year one. Ohio State was ranked 16th in the initial poll before they ended up leapfrogging TCU on the final ranking of the season. They baptized Wisconsin 55-0 in that Big Ten championship game. Cardale Jones takes over as their third quarterback of the season. TCU's left out in the cold, angry as hell, and doesn't get their revenge until last year. And so you look down on this list, Fitz, the one-loss teams end with Louisville ranked at 13th. I think because of how badly they got beat by a really bad Pitt team, that's probably going to be a non-starter, or at the very least something that makes it awfully difficult for them to get in, even if you were to flesh out the best possible end of their season. And they've still got to play Virginia Tech, Virginia, Miami, and Kentucky. So no currently ranked teams on their schedule at this point in time until they get past that. But I look at Missouri, and to me, that's where I draw the line and say Missouri looks like the lowest ranked team with a real chance of actually cracking this, in part because they get Georgia this weekend. They're heading on the road to Athens. And so if you get that win, you're in the driver's seat in the SEC East, and now you've got the path laid out before you for a playoff run.
No, I agree with you. I think Penn State, right above them, also has a very clear path, but Penn State just hasn't looked like they're capable of that path, right? So the question of who is the lowest team that seems to control its own destiny, I would love to find a way. I truly would love to find a way where LSU just runs through the rest of the season and somehow we get a 2-loss team into this thing. I just think this year there's too much chaos in front to ever make that. It would take too much help to get there. So in my mind, I like your call on Missouri. I think Penn State has a little bit more realistic chance. But again, Penn State's offense has not looked national championship college football playoff worthy, right? Like we can all agree on that. So it's hard for me to see that happening.
I think they're a lot more built to beat Ohio State than they are Michigan at this juncture. We saw how those two games went last year, and we saw how the Ohio State game went this year, right? Ohio State's offense, not nearly explosive outside of guys named Marvin Harrison Jr., but Penn State's offense, definitely not, and certainly not enough ass up front to withstand what Michigan's going to try and do to them again, like they did last year, which is just use the great wall of meat they have on that front line and march firmly down the field. So that's going to be the tough one for them. Missouri, though, not walking into any easier situation, right? That's on the road between the hedges this weekend. So a tall order for both those teams just on the outside looking in.
What about, it would take a little bit of help along the way, but are we living in a world where Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss find their way into the college football playoff? I mean, ranked number 10 just sort of hit me seeing that. I mean, you think about the one loss, and it'll be called a quality loss because of, it's Alabama. I don't know. Is there some path for Ole Miss in your mind?
Well, I mean, they just need Alabama to lose, right? Because Bama's got the head-to-head win. They're currently first in the West. So if they lose, Ole Miss does unfortunately have to go across the aisle and play Georgia during the regular season. So even if it went best-case scenario for them, you've now got you would need Alabama to lose, and then you would have Georgia coming up in the regular season and potentially, depending on how it shakes out, seeing them again in the postseason. So they've got a path there, but they need help because right now inside their own division, they're not even first, and they lost that head-to-head matchup there.
Yeah, I still think Alabama is going to take a loss somewhere else there. So I think I am the naysayer here, Mike. Alabama is going to play their way. I wouldn't be surprised at all. This is my weekly hill to die on. Alabama is going to play their way out of the college football playoff conversation this year because they are just not good enough.
Man, I think Alabama made the adjustment early on, after they worked out, after that USF game where they decided to cycle through Tyler Buckner and the backup quarterbacks there. And then all of a sudden they came out and they're like, yeah, no, we're going to go back to Jalen Milroe. We went out there, we had our hall pass for the weekend. We went and did our thing at our buddy's bachelor party, and it wasn't nearly as fun as we thought it was going to be. And so now we came back home to Jalen's loving arms. And I think they figured it's not even the boa constrictor teams for Alabama. Defensively, yeah, they got dudes, Dallas Turner and company are getting after the pass. All the stuff you'd expect from a Bama defense is going on. But offensively, they're much more I liken a lot of football things to blackjack. they're someone who doubles every time they see 11. Like every time they got a one-on-one matchup down the field, Jalen's chucking that thing. And they're just counting on they're going to hit enough of those to swing the balance. They don't want to seesaw and just play normal hands of blackjack. They came there for the fun stuff. So it didn't even decide to turn into an offense that was just going to ground and pound it. They're still trying to chuck it all over the yard at certain points. And they're making it work with enough of those big plays because they've got enough athletes outside to make them and the perfect defense to offset that.
I know we're running long on this space, but I got to ask you one more question before we get out of here. Ohio State is the number one team in all the land, but I was driving around a few weeks ago after the Ohio State-Penn State game, might have been last, that all runs together at this point in the season, and I heard our buddy Heather Dinich sitting there on radio, and she said, did anybody watch either of these teams and really think, wow, that looks like the best team in the country? And I don't think I think Heather was right about that. And now I'm sitting here having to justify why Ohio State, who had one of the ugliest damn wins I can remember over Penn State and one of the luckiest wins I've ever seen against Notre Dame. Sorry to bring that wound back up to you. And they're sitting at number one? Like, I'm just a little, I don't know. I'm a little surprised that Ohio State sits at the top of the rankings.
I'm not, just because at the end of the day, they still found a way to win those games. And I think this year that counts more than ever, Fitz, because like you said, with Georgia and Michigan, we don't really know. We're kind of in that limbo where we believe we know who you are. And certainly in Michigan, you've taken care of business and you've treated bad teams bad. You haven't messed around. You haven't played with your food. And so you get that benefit of the doubt. But we really don't totally know yet with a lot of these teams. And so we're doing all of this and it's all about what you've accomplished, because this year we don't have a dominant team, because Alabama and Clemson and, Georgia, I don't want to say took a step back at quarterback. Carson Beck's had moments, but we had turnover at those spots that weren't immediately replaced with, yes, ultimate checkmark guy, the next first-round draft picks. Like our 2 first-round draft picks in USC and North Carolina have had abysmal last couple of weeks of college football. And so I think because you've had places that were those traditional powers kind of come back down to earth, it's made all of the margins a lot closer across the sport now.
Check out Golic and Gojo wherever you get your podcasts. Hang out with Mike there and everywhere. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Golic Jr. Follow me at Jason Fitz. Also, be sure you're hanging out with us across the Yahoo Sports family. We got great stuff out on the Yahoo Sports app, obviously. Putting out a bunch of college football content there you can check out as well. Mike, good hanging with you, buddy. Go eat some candy, man. Like, I missed the Cheez-It. But that's okay. Maybe next week.
Are you handing out candy tonight to kids? Like, are you I know Halloween's like your favorite holiday, maybe your favorite day on earth. I know you're trying to be a little bit less attached to it now, growth mindset, but do you give out candy? I know you usually like scared people, but do you actually give out treats?
Yeah. Full-size candy bars. Full-size candy bars are the only way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is like the one big commonality we have.
Right. And look, and you know me, I'm inherently cheap. So like I would like to point out that when I make my budget at the beginning of the year, there's actually a line item every month that says full-size candy bars. Because, like, if you don't allocate for it, then, bam, you're going to blow your budget. So, yeah, like a little money every, that whole Dave Ramsey thing, a little bit of money, every single check goes to the full-size candy bar fund.
I want to truly believe that you, who are absolutely neurotic enough to have a spreadsheet with this on it, actually have that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You got to put birthdays on it, Christmas on it, all of these things. Like you have to account for everything. If you don't account for it, then the whole budget gets blown, Mike. Like, look, I'm just a creature of habit. You know me. Like I go exactly where I'm told. I get wound up and I do exactly what I'm supposed to do. So like if my Excel sheet doesn't tell me to spend on it, that's why I never reach for the wallet when we hang out, because you haven't made the spreadsheet yet, buddy.
So what I need to do is hack your spreadsheet and include dinner for Mike on a line item every month now.
Line item, monthly line item, and then all of a sudden, bam, we'll be good to go once we do that. Good hanging with you, brother. We should do this again.
Good to see you, buddy. Sorry your takes still haven't improved.
Wow. You know what? I got nothing. Thanks. All right, bye.
See ya.